$200 billion. Will the White House ask Congress for that much to pay for the war with Iran? That's the figure everyone's talking about today. Will Congress go along? Cuba's economy is in free fall. Is its government about to collapse? President Trump seems to think so. So what's next? We asked Florida Republican Carlos Jimenez, the only Cuban-born member of Congress. My CBS News colleague Steve Hartman won an Oscar. He would gladly give it back if the subjects of his short film documentary had their children back. Steve joins us. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. First, let's talk about this. My face, these two bandages, they're for biopsies. My dermatologist, super cautious, just wants to make sure there's no skin cancer lurking underneath what we laughingly refer to here as my moneymaker. It is not a moneymaker. But with these bandages, it seemed like a good day to experiment with something I've been thinking about doing for months. Doing the show without any makeup or hairspray. Free range major, as it were. So here we are. And let these be a reminder. Mind your health. Keep track of things, whatever they might be. That's what I'm doing. Onward. It appears Congress, which has not authorized the war with Iran, will be asked to provide somewhere around $200 billion to pay for it. That number is not official, but senior House and Senate Republicans did not deny it today and sounded about it vaguely supportive. It was just 2 weeks ago, you might remember, when House Speaker Mike Johnson said he expected a request in the range of $50 billion. The president said today this war, which he keeps calling an excursion, is almost over in terms of objectives accomplished. Then why does he need $200 billion to pay for it? There's also this nagging issue of oil and natural gas infrastructure in the Middle East. It's being damaged in visible and alarming ways. The Israelis struck Iran's South Pars gas field. It's one of many places of energy significance all of us are learning about in real time as this war continues. Hours later, a natural gas facility in Qatar was struck and the Qataris blamed Iran. Now, most of the natural gas produced at the Pars field goes to Iran. But Qatar is the world's third largest exporter of natural gas. All of this continued to roil global markets. Oil traded above $95 here in the States, and Brent crude traded well above $105 today. Both of those valuations up over 40% since this war began. President Trump said he was displeased with the Israeli strike on Pars. That's what he said on social media. Today in the Oval Office, with the Japanese Prime Minister by his side, the message was a bit mixed. Here's what the president said he said to the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
I told him, don't do that, and he won't do that. We didn't discuss. You know, we're independent, we get along great. It's coordinated, but on occasion he'll do something, and if I don't like it, and so we're not doing that anymore.
We're not doing that anymore. It's coordinated. We didn't discuss. Make of that what you will. Iran has vowed more attacks on oil and natural gas infrastructure in the region. The average price of gas here today, according to AAA, $3.88 per gallon. It was $2.92 a gallon a month ago. That's not the only metric to evaluate this war with Iran, but it is one sufficiently worrisome to the administration that it is now considering lifting sanctions on Iranian oil. Yes, Iranian oil already at sea. This in a bid to boost global supplies and slow, if possible, price spikes for you at the pump. There is another big part of the story, one we highlighted quite a bit last night, the disposition of Iran's nuclear program, specifically its uranium and its ability to enrich it to weapons-grade levels. About that, we begin tonight with CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan. Also joining us at the table, CBS News national security analyst Aaron McClain. We've mentioned this before, worth mentioning again. He also hosts School of War podcast. Margaret, to start with you had a very important interview with the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency about Iran and its nuclear potential. What did you learn?
Yes, Rafael Grossi is the Director General of the UN watchdog on nuclear programs. They send inspectors around the world to make sure countries are living up to the law as they attest to it. And he became part of this conversation because it was that data about what you keep hearing about, the 60% enriched uranium, the 400 or so kilograms. That was all IAEA data. He's here in Washington. He's talking to top Trump administration officials about what comes next after these combat operations end. He was extremely clear that you cannot end this extremely sophisticated, as he put it, and extensive nuclear program. You cannot kill it through military action alone. And when we spoke, I asked him to explain what he thinks is coming next. I also put to him what the director of national intelligence testified to Congress about, which was her proclamation that Iran, their ability to enrich uranium was obliterated, and there have been no efforts since June, since the 12-day war, by Iran to rebuild their capacity. Take a listen. The U.S. Director of National Intelligence told Congress yesterday that Iran's enrichment program was obliterated, that the U.S. has seen no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you have any indication that the new supreme leader would want a weapons program?
Well, I don't disagree with that. We don't see major activity, which is logical because there is a military campaign ongoing. Whatever you're not going to start, bringing cranes and workers.
But they weren't doing it in the lead up to the war either, according to the Secretary of State.
Maybe. By the way, what we have is satellite imagery. Mm-hmm. All right. So at least the IAEA, maybe others have other technical means or personal means to check what is happening. As far as we are concerned, we haven't seen activity. But as I was saying, a lot has survived. They have the capabilities, they have the knowledge, they have the industrial ability to do that. This is why we need to go back to a negotiating table. It's going to be needed.
So the emphasis there on you can't bomb your way to success here, President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, although Netanyahu did say today that they're destroying nuclear infrastructure. But what Grossi's talking about is you can't bomb away knowledge. You can't unlearn the skill set that many of these Iranian scientists have developed. And so ultimately, whether it's with this regime, who has a firm hold, according to U.S. intelligence, or whatever comes next, what happens, not just to that enriched uranium and the centrifuges, but what happens with the aspiration? And to be clear, the IAEA never said Iran was developing a nuclear weapons program after the year 2003, as U.S. intelligence has said, but they just couldn't rule it out entirely either. And that's what leads us to this murky state we are in.
Aaron, one of the topics of conversation in Washington today is there anything diverging about the goals of the Israelis and the United States? Benjamin Netanyahu said today that Iran no longer has the ability to enrich uranium or make ballistic missiles. He also said you can't have a revolution, meaning a regime change, without boots on the ground. You can't do it only through the air. President Trump said today when asked about boots on the ground, I'm not sending troops anywhere. What does this tell us, if anything, about possible divergence of goals or tactics?
Well, if you think back to the very early moments of the war major, when President Trump gave those first remarks the Saturday morning things started, he listed these military objectives, military, the nuclear program, also the Iranian Navy. He spoke actually on that day with a fairly nuanced language about regime change. He basically said, to put it in my own words, regime change would be great, but don't hold me accountable for it. It's not actually the specific goal of the United States. His rhetoric has obviously varied somewhat since then, given the day. For the Israelis, though, if you look at the targets that they're hitting, you look at the kind of decapitation strikes that they're running, you look at their assaults on besieged checkpoints, elements of regime oppression in Tehran using drones, very small, very targeted explosions, along with very large strikes on things like IRGC facilities. It's clear that they are pursuing regime change, or at least a component of it from the air, pretty aggressively. What sort of ground force is Netanyahu referring to? I mean, President Trump said made reference on the first day to the Iranian people. Prime Minister Netanyahu has encouraged the Iranian people to take to the streets to celebrate the holiday that they had this week. That may be some part of this.
Margaret, you're deeply read in on all this. Mm-hmm. What is your sense of it, and what is the word you're getting in the region from whether people who are in countries that we are aligned with in the Gulf, are they trying to figure out who's diverging from what? in terms of objectives and goals.
Right. Well, from day one, many of the U.S. allies that I've been speaking to have raised that question of, first of all, tell me when it ends, tell me how it ends,
right.
but also we don't want a part of this. They don't want the incoming. And it's the United Arab Emirates and some of those Gulf countries that the U.S. is now expediting defensive weaponry to that have really taken that incoming for being allied with us in the first place. So there is a large degree of concern, but then you're in it, so how do you finish it? And
right.
what are you leaving us with next door is a very big question. So, and let's be clear here. I mean, if we're talking about human rights, many of our allied nations don't have great human rights records themselves. They're not incredibly uncomfortable with autocratic regimes, right? But they don't like the mischief. They don't like the militias. They don't like the things that destabilize their backyard. So, in other words, you know, the devil.
And right now, they're deeply worried about damage to energy infrastructure, which seems to be increasing, not decreasing.
Yes. And by the way, a lot of the Iranian opposition are sitting in Evin prison up the street, right? Like a lot of the organized leadership, to the degree it even exists, has been repressed, if not killed and shot, as Marco Rubio said under testimony, with snipers, or put in prison. And we're not. Maybe that's a next target. I don't know. But there hasn't been an organized opposition within Iran. So how do you ultimately resolve this stated end goal of dealing with the nuclear program? Who are you negotiating with? And by the way, Mr. Grossi would like it be his agency that goes in and takes out those canisters of enriched uranium.
Aaron, I often burden you with the question, what should we keep track of in the next couple, 3 days? I'm going to burden you with that again. What are you watching?
This question of the nuclear program and what we're going to do about it militarily as the United States and Israel make progress towards expanding air superiority, trying to pursue air dominance across the country. That's the question of the day. Rafael Grossi said to Margaret this morning, you know, you can't bomb away nuclear ambitions. That's certainly true, barring the possibility of regime change. But you can bomb highly enriched uranium. You can blow it in sight. You can render it safe, assuming that the risk imposed by the practical situation on the ground makes it possible to do so. That's presumably why President Trump has not, our colleague Jennifer Jacobs reported yesterday, has not yet made a decision about whether or not to do this. I'm sure that there is some assessment of the particular situation on the ground and how feasible action would actually be.
But you don't negotiate that in 4 to 6 weeks, even if you end combat operations. The rest of this is going to take some time.
Take some time for sure. Margaret Brennan, Aaron McLean, thank you very much, as always. You can see more of Margaret's interview with Rafael Grossi this Sunday on Face the Nation, 10:30 a.m. Eastern on CBS. CBS's Weijia Jiang joins us now from the White House. Weijia, you heard the conversation here. Please add to it based on what the president said, and he said quite a few things today in the Oval Office.
He did, Major, so I'll pick up where Aaron left off about this issue of boots on the ground, because as we know, that would be required to remove any of that enriched uranium that is at the core of the nuclear capabilities that we're talking about. And the president was asked explicitly today whether he plans to put boots on the ground. And he said, no, I'm not putting troops anywhere. He also said, if I decided to, I wouldn't tell you, but no, I'm not doing that. So it seems as of now, he says he doesn't have plans to do that. The president also talked about this $200 billion supplemental request from the Pentagon to Congress to continue funding the war. We have heard from both Democrats and Republicans their hesitancy to even engage on that huge of a number, which, by the way, is more than all the funding that the U.S. has provided to the war in Ukraine. And today in the Oval Office, I was in there, Major, and the president spoke again extensively about how the U.S. has obliterated the Iranian military capability. He also said that he thought the war would be wrapped up soon. So I asked him if that was the case, why the Pentagon still needed hundreds of billions of dollars. Here's what he said.
If the war is almost over, why is the Pentagon going to ask Congress for an additional $200 billion?
Well, we're asking for a lot of reasons beyond even what we're talking about in Iran. This is a very volatile world, and the military equipment, the power of some of this weaponry is unthinkable. You don't even want to know about it. Oh, you could end this thing in 2 seconds if you wanted to, but But we are being very judicious. But we want to do, don't forget, Biden gave away, I rebuilt the military in my first term. Biden gave away so stupidly to Afghanistan a lot. He didn't want to move it. He was too lazy, too stupid to move it. But it was a very small amount. It was a lot, but it was very small relative to what I purchased and what I built. We want to have vast amounts of ammunition, which we have right now. We have a lot of ammunition, but it was taken down by giving so much to Ukraine.
The president continues to insist that this conflict is almost over, although Major today he did not offer any new timeline for when that may be. Major.
Rita Jane, White House, thank you so much. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy today warned that if TSA employees miss another paycheck next week, the problems this week will look, in his words, like child's play, the problems he means at airports, long lines, etc. More than 10% of all TSA workers called out sick yesterday. That caused significant delays at airports across the country, like in Houston and Atlanta, where nearly 40% of workers called out sick Tuesday. New York, Philadelphia, seeing a fourth of their staff not coming into work. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry joins me now from Atlanta. Skylar, what are you seeing? What are you detecting? What are you hearing from travelers?
Yeah, Major, it depends who you ask, when you ask them, and obviously where you ask them. Here in Atlanta, lines have been relatively short over the course of the day, but this morning we saw folks waiting in the main checkpoint here at Hartsfield-Jackson for more than an hour, close to an hour and a half. And we have seen visuals elsewhere across the country of people waiting in security lines that stretch out to parking lots and into the street. As many, as you pointed out, TSA officers continue to call out. As you pointed out, there is a significant number of those across the country that have called out in recent days, Atlanta ranking in the top 3, in addition to airports in Philadelphia and Houston's Hobby International Airport as well. We also have learned that several checkpoints have closed at Houston's Bush Airport, as well as other checkpoints that have closed in Philadelphia, just illustrating the chaos and confusion, if you will, for travelers across the country, some of whom that we spoke with expressed their frustrations and urged Congress to get to work. Now, coincidentally, we happened to run into Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia, who is landing here back from D.C. He is blaming this on Democrats, saying that because of their sticking point in terms of what they want to see before moving forward with any additional funding, that this simply cannot happen. Take a listen to what he had to say.
It's obvious that we have a problem. We need our TS agents at work. And when you have right here in the city of Atlanta, over 36% have called in sick or out this week, and across the nation it's around 10%, all because you want to protect illegal aliens out here and these illegal immigrants. It's time to fund this agency, especially when we've got an armed conflict going on in the Middle East. Right now we should have heightened security, not shutting down security agencies.
And so the frustration, as you can imagine, Major, for travelers is not knowing when to show up as it relates to trying to make sure that they are on time for their flights, how best to navigate these TSA checkpoints, because as I pointed out, some are waiting in lines for hours, others saying that they simply aren't sure what to do, worried about flights, connecting flights and the rest. Everyone urged to pack their patience, but obviously the frustration bubble continues to grow.
Skylar Henry, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Still to come on the Takeout, Republican Carlos Jimenez joins me live to assess potential regime change in Cuba. That's a very hot topic just now. Also, a new poll reveals that two Republicans now currently stand atop a very crowded field to be the next governor of California. Our political panel will dissect that. Plus, why a wilderness firefighter in Montana thinks he can be the state's first member of the House who's a Democrat in some 30 years. I sit down with smoke jumper Sam Forstag. Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back. As President Trump weighs a potential negotiated deal with Cuba, Florida Republican Congressman Carlos Jimenez is pushing for regime change, and he joins me now. He's the only Cuban-born lawmaker in Congress, by the way. Congressman, good to have you with us. When you think of regime change, What comes to your mind? How is it achieved? And what does it look like in the aftermath?
Well, the aftermath is a democratic Cuba that's no longer an adversary to the United States, no longer harbors our biggest adversaries in the world, like China and Russia and Iran and North Korea, and they're friendly to that, and they have huge intelligence gathering operations that are happening in Cuba right now. And so what I envision is a Cuba which is free and democratic and a friend of the United States and is no longer a security threat to the United States.
And how does that happen?
There's no playbook for that, Major. And so what's happening right now is because of the complete incompetence and corruption of this regime, the regime cannot provide even power to its people. There's nightly blackouts. There's very little food. There's very little medicine, and the people are getting more and more desperate. And so they're coming out in thousands, basically banging on pots and pans at night, and in some cases they're actually setting fire to some of the Communist Party buildings. And so the uprising is starting. So that's one way you can, very similar to what happened in Eastern Europe in the late 80s when the communist regimes there were overthrown. It's the population and the people say enough is enough. You guys got to go. And that's the one way I would like it. But this regime is very oppressive, and anytime that people come out, people lose their lives. Thousands of people are thrown in jail, and that's how they've been able to keep power, by basically scaring the people to death. And so they have to, I guess, they have to keep what they have. Okay, I mean, which is nothing.
Right.
All right, but the regime is very, very oppressive and has been for decades.
So the president talks a lot about Venezuela, and he talks about it as a surgical operation that took out Nicolas Maduro. The regime remained, but the regime, seeing that surgical military operation, turned over a new leaf, kind of, and became more cooperative with the United States. Is that something that could happen in Cuba?
First of all, I don't believe that assessment either.
Okay.
What we have now in Venezuela is a interim dictator. Delcy Rodriguez is part of the Maduro regime. The only reason that she does and cooperates with the United States is she saw what happened to Nicolas Maduro. She doesn't want it to happen to her. But eventually, we also have to turn the page there. Venezuela deserves to be free and democratic. And the only way that Venezuela is going to be a friend of the United States for the long term is with a new regime. And that has to be, the people of Venezuela have to choose who their next leader is. They already chose that about a year ago.
Right.
And Nicolas Maduro stole that election. And so they have Edmundo Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado, which won the Nobel Peace Prize. They're waiting in the wings to, they're the rightful government of Venezuela. They're waiting in the wings. I support that democratically elected government. We need to get that as soon as possible. Knowing that as soon as possible, we need to have another set of elections with a new reality and see who the Venezuelan people actually choose as their leader. And once you have that, then you'll have stability in Venezuela.
So
then you'll have a friend of the United States. Completely different situation than Cuba. Okay.
Right. So let me ask you this. You hear the president's rhetoric as much as I do. He seems content with what's going on in Venezuela now. Does that discourage you about what he might be willing to accept in Cuba? Or do you fear that he might be willing to accept something similar?
No, I don't think he's going to accept Delcy Rodriguez as the final answer. I mean, when really think about it, what he says is, yeah, she's great. She's great. She does everything that I tell her to do. That's a backhanded kind of compliment, especially in Venezuela, and especially with the people of that regime. They're saying, "Oh my God, she's doing what the president of the United States wants him to do." And so, really, I think that's just kind of setting up for the next steps. What the plan in Venezuela is stability, which this regime, I guess, provides it for a while. A economic recovery, and then a transition, and what's called reconciliation. And that reconciliation is a transition to a democratic Venezuela. For some of us, it can't happen quickly enough, and some of us have to be a little more patient. But I think at the end game for this administration, the Trump administration, and Secretary Rubio is some kind of transition to democracy in Venezuela. Now, the playbook in Cuba
Very quickly
is a little
on Cuba.
different. Okay. Yeah.
Very quickly on Cuba.
The playbook is more pressure, economic pressure. Do not allow them to escape, because they're at the weakest position they've ever been, and just keep the pressure up. And then we'll see what happens next and what steps the United States has to take in order to bring about the change that's so necessary for our security and also the freedom that the Cuban people deserve.
I appreciate the time. Florida Republican Congressman Carlos Jimenez, I appreciate it. Thanks. Up next, could an upset be on the horizon in California? Our political panel here to discuss the race for governor. That's next. Welcome back to Takeout. Political panel time, isn't it exciting? Joined by Republican strategist Aaron McGuire and DNC, that's Democratic National Committee Deputy Communications Director Hannah Moldavan. Hannah, I want to talk to you about a respected poll in California. It's a good poll, Berkeley poll, came out this week. So you can run Republicans and Democrats. The top two finishers will go on for the general election, governor of California. And right now, according to this good poll, no one's disputing it, two Republicans are leading that. Look at that. Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco, who's a sheriff in one of the counties in California. Then Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer, Xavier Becerra, Antonio Villaraigosa. Lots of Democrats are dividing up what has historically, at least in modern history, been a Democratic advantage. How worried are you about this?
The DNC doesn't wade into primaries.
I know. Not officially. How unofficially worried are you about this?
Unofficially, we're not worried. Democrats are strong in California. We saw in 2025 just how strong they were. If you remember, Governor Newsom put Prop 50 on the ballot. We saw historic turnout and enthusiasm from even voters that we lost in 2024. So we are confident whatever Democrat does come out on top, we are going to win.
Does this field need to get narrower on the Democratic side?
I do think...
I know you can't have an official position on that.
No official position, but I think Democratic voters need to make their voices heard, both in these polls, but also going out talking to these candidates. We need, obviously, someone to emerge from there.
Aaron?
Oh, it's cannibalism at its finest, isn't it? Democrats really thought this jungle primary system. Metaphorically, yes, of course. No real people are hurt in this situation. But Democrats really did think that this jungle primary system would keep two Democrats at the top and that they could really kind of completely remove Republicans from most of the equation in California. Well, aren't they learning the hard lesson the hard way when all of this ego in California has all of these people pursuing that office when, in fact, absolutely none of them might make the ballot come November?
I mean, things are going to have to shake out a little bit more clearly on the Democratic side, it seems. Some of these candidates are going to either the voters are going to send them a message or they're going to have to look at this and say, I got to get out.
Yeah, and I think that's why we have primaries. We want to hear the different voices within the party. We have some great candidates. That's what the primary process is for. There's a reason the DNC doesn't wade into these primaries, and it's because we trust the voters. And so the voters will come through for us here.
Except when Kamala Harris became the presidential nominee. Then the DNC didn't care about primary voters, but that's okay.
That's an uncomfortable fact. Hannah will concede, probably, unofficially. $200 billion for the war. Aaron? 2 weeks ago, Mike Johnson pegged it at $50 billion. Are Republicans just going to write that check?
I doubt it. There's already a bit of consternation within the elected officials within the Republican Party. There's plenty of polling that shows the MAGA base is still very much behind President Trump and what he's doing on this. So when you look at the members of Congress that are elected, they're going to have concerns about writing an open-ended check, about what the goals are, and about what that money is going to be used for. Those are major questions and considerations that need to be given before a very large amount of money is given over in pursuit of a war that people are still very unclear on goals, on means, on opportunity, and on what the definition of success looks like at this point.
And Hannah, if Democrats are talking as they relentlessly are about affordability and other things, $200 billion seems to me to add to that conversational arc.
That's absolutely right. I mean, number one, we're losing American soldiers. 13 have died, over 200 wounded. And we cannot forget about that fact when we're talking about this. But when we think about affordability, $200 billion, people that supported Donald Trump voted for him because they believed he would do what he said, which is lower costs on day one. And instead, what we've seen is higher prices than ever before. Gas prices are going up, utility prices are going up, and the money that he could be spending for this war, not even including the $200 billion, could be going to extend ACA tax credits to help people pay for their health care. This is not where the American people are. We know that. Aaron kind of talked about that a little bit, where Republicans might not even be okay with this. We're seeing some breaking within the Republican Party, and maybe they should listen to the American people.
This week, there was an inflation readout that didn't have any of the war costs, and it was near 3%.
Right. There are definite economic issues that are going to be confounding and complicating any more aggression and war spending in Iran. And I think whether it's the $200 billion for potentially going to Iran, the cost, to your point, the cost of energy going up, the cost of gas going up, all of that together hits the affordability message the wrong way for Republicans right now. But there is a political forever between now and November.
Talk about multiplier effects. We often do. Aaron McGuire, Hannah Muldaven, thank you so much for coming in. Coming up, I'll speak with Sam Forstag. He's a progressive candidate running in Montana. He also fights wildfires. That's his day job. More on that when we come back. This is The Takeout. Welcome back. Montana hasn't elected a Democrat to the House since the late 1990s. His name was Pat Williams. I covered him. Sam Forstag, who you see here, is trying to change that in the race to replace retiring Republican Congressman Ryan Zinke. Forstag is a smoke jumper, which means he jumps out of planes into remote wilderness to put out wildfires. Here's part of our conversation. In your campaign video, you say you jump when there's a crisis or a siren. What are you jumping into, and what are you jumping for?
Well, I spent the last 8 years as a wildland firefighter. The last 4 as a smoke jumper. We jump out of airplanes from 3,000 feet to put out fires before they grow. Premise being that, well, if we can get 2 or 4 guys on the ground there and put that thing out, well, we don't have to deal with another mega fire. And we're jumping into the most beautiful corners of the country, our public lands across the West.
So what's the fire in Washington?
Well, right, how much time you got? Right now, the biggest fires that people are dealing with back home in Montana, where I live, is, well, nobody can afford housing. We got cities where housing has doubled or tripled in cost, if not more, in the last 5 or 10 years in Western Montana, and our wages have not kept up. And it is a fire like a broken healthcare system where, I had to leave smoke jumping to run for this office. You can't run for public office as a federal employee, and I'm looking at marketplace plans where you're paying $700, $800, $900 for healthcare where you don't get a lick of care until you pay $12,000. I mean, the basic fire here is that working people in this country cannot afford the basics. And unfortunately, government seems to have forgotten that that is what government is for, is to improve our lives materially when the market ain't meeting that need. And I'm running for Congress to try to help us remember that government can still fix those big problems.
You also say that billionaires are burning it all down so they can buy it all up.
Quite literally.
Is that the lived experience in Montana?
Well, in the last year, on top of being a smoke jumper, I was vice president of my union's local, covering about 800 public servants across Western Montana, and they fired about a quarter of the Forest Service between Doge cuts and all the rest. And when our union reached out to our representatives, we heard crickets. And most of the people that they were firing were making less than $20 an hour, swinging tools and running chainsaws to maintain our public lands. And, well, none of that is about efficiency, because there's nothing more efficient than somebody swinging a tool for $14 an hour to make sure you can make it up a road to a trailhead or up a trail to the wilderness. What it's about is power, and it's about consolidation, and it's about privatizing what few public goods working people still have access to in this country.
And a fair number, I'm going to guess, of those rank-and-file members of your union voted for President Trump.
Oh, yeah, I got friends and coworkers, lots of them, who voted both ways. And at the end of the day, well, there are a lot of people who are...
What's the disconnect?
Well, the disconnect, I would tell you, is that people's lives were not improving, not just in the last year, but the last 5 years or 20 or 30 years. I got coworkers who were just like me, making $19 an hour, jumping out of airplanes to put out fires in communities where you could not find a house for less than $500,000. And those people's lives did not materially improve after 4 years of Democratic control. And so you know what they did? They voted for the party out of power. And that's real frustrating if you're the head of a federal union, right? Watching working people lose their jobs, public lands and public services being gutted. But it's also perfectly understandable, because if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, like I did all the way through college, or if you're working 2 jobs worth of hours, you don't have time to follow the intricacies of policymaking. Mm-hmm. You just know your life got worse, and so you voted for the other guy.
There are plenty of Democrats in Washington who tell me that in the rearview mirror, 2024 was a Democratic Party that nationally was viewed as too progressive, too out of touch. You identify yourself as a progressive. What's the counter argument to that appraisal?
I'm running as a populist, because populism is what the Democratic Party is supposed to be about. It's what democracy is supposed to be about. And
How do you define populism?
I would define it as, well, you look at who the Democratic Party just lost last election. The majority of people making under $100,000 a year voted Republican. About half of union members in my state did not vote for Democrats last year, and a whole lot of young people stayed home or they swung to the right. because they didn't see any cause for hope in politics. And so populism, well, it's giving those folks, people like me, someone that they can see their lived experience reflected in as an option for a candidate. And you do not see a lot of that in a country where the average net worth of a congressperson is $3 to $4 million, depending on the day and depending on how good the stock market is doing. You don't see that in a country where the average congressperson is 56 or 58 years old, and somehow the Democratic Party is the older of those two. So populism is just getting back to the basics of running people and giving people the mic who can actually speak to what it's like to be on the wrong end of all these broken systems.
In 30 seconds, give me 2 economic things that make you a populist.
I'll tell you the first one. If we are dealing with a housing crisis, let's address it like a crisis. We should be spending the sorts of resources that are commensurate with that problem. And we have had a housing crisis before. We had one after World War II. We stepped in, we built homes. We made sure people could afford them. And I'll tell you what else. I'm living in a state where I cannot conceive of how I would pay to raise a family and have kids like I would like to, because the average cost of childcare is $19,000 a year. So a populist candidate, a populist government would step in to make sure that our populace, that normal working people, can afford childcare, just like they can in New Mexico. That is what the government should be paying for, not tax cuts for the richest people in this country, and not cutting the corporate tax rate again, while normal people like me are struggling just to get by.
Sam Forstad, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Coming up, my conversation with Steve Hartman. We talk about his Oscar-winning documentary, All the Empty Rooms. It's emotionally pretty tough. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Unmade beds, knickknacks, posters, overdue books. That's some of what CBS News correspondent Steve Hartman found in his now Oscar-winning documentary, All the Empty Rooms, which looks at the bedrooms preserved by the parents because the children who occupied them were killed in school shootings. It's one of those rooms.
That's the outfit she had out.
This is what she was going to wear on Friday?
Well, she was either going to wear this outfit or this outfit.
She had like 2 set
or this
out.
dress.
Did you do this often? Prepare the next day's clothes?
Yeah, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had given her this little trinket box. And when we had opened it, she had these letters in here. And these letters were notes to her future self.
I spoke with Hartman about the project and why he chose initially to keep it a secret. Here's some of our conversation. The film opens with 2 words, ready, yes. Tell me about that conversation.
I'm not sure which conversation you're talking about. Is it the opening sound of the film?
Yes. It's a
We're at the
question,
door?
ready, and you say yes.
Ready yet? Well, I think we're taking a deep breath before we knock on the door, as I recall. And that is me and photographer Lou Bope standing at the threshold of one of the parents, their home, about to go in and ask a big, huge favor of, can we photograph your child's bedroom? And you never know what to say when you're in those moments. You're just meeting somebody for the first time who's lost, a child, and it's just inevitably awkward. You don't want to say the thing that you should never say is like, I'm sorry for your loss, because then they don't know what to say to that. So it's always just a hurdle to get past that. But once we did, we got close.
And that's why I wanted to start there, Steve, because the film captures the loss of these parents, this unimaginable loss, but it is also a kind of silent commentary on the difficulty of the task you set to accomplish. Because it's hard on you, it's hard on Lou, you can see it, you can feel it, and I detected that there was, in that ready yes, a kind of inherent dishonesty. You can't ever be ready for that, and you can't ever confidently say yes, but you're plunging ahead anyway.
You're absolutely right. As journalists, part of the reason I became a feature reporter and did not cover hard news subjects is because I never wanted to be that reporter who was knocking on the door of somebody who just lost a loved one. I don't think we should do that in the aftermath, in the immediate aftermath of things like school shootings. I don't think that's our best look. But after some time, I think the parents welcome us, as they did in this case, because they want the world to know who their child was. So I knew that I was to be welcomed, but it's still just a little, as a journalist, it's just a little uncomfortable, awkward. It took a great deal of trust on the part of the parents to open that door, especially to open that door to the next door, which was the bedroom of their child.
And this project, as the film says, took 7 years. Why did it take 7 years?
Because, as you might expect, I was asking to go into a very sacred space of the child's bedroom, and most parents didn't want to be part of that. Some because the room had been repurposed or the things had packed up. And so I was sending letters to pretty much every parent who lost a child since Sandy Hook, asking to be allowed into this sacred space. So it took a while to get enough yeses. And that's partly why it took so long. I also did this on the sly. I did not tell our minders at CBS News that I was even doing this project. So I was working this in on weekends when families would agree, and doing it on my own time because, quite frankly, I thought they would say no if I asked our bosses, because it's so off-brand for me. I'm the feel-good news guy, and I wanted to do it, but I didn't want somebody to say, no, you can't do it. So those are the main reasons why it took as long as it did.
Some of the best work I've done without telling my bosses, Steve. So I applaud you for that instinct and that approach. I get the feeling, Steve, that if you could, you would melt the Oscar or put it in a wood chipper if you could give these families what they've lost back.
Absolutely. Everybody on the team, we got 2 Oscars for the team, and I think we would do that very thing because, when we won, there's joy, of course, even the parents, there was great joy on the faces of the parents who attended the Oscar ceremony with us. But at the same time, we would all, wish this story did not need to be told. But we do find purpose, all of us involved, in the fact that maybe we can help move the needle and make some progress because of the unique approach of the film. It's different, really, as you know, than anything else that's been done on the subject.
It is. And there's a word I want to discuss with you because you bring it up in the film, numb. It's a big word. It looms over this topic of school shootings and mass shootings in our country. And it's a deeply important word because if that's true, we're more lost than we realize.
And it has become true, at least on this subject. I know because I was numb. I'd covered school shootings and, eventually, pretty quickly, I would forget about them. I'd forget the names of the schools. I would forget the children who were lost, and I was numb. It was just another school shooting. And we saw it on our newscasts. The coverage that was 1 week long shrunk down to 2 or 3 days, shrunk down to 1 day. And it's just another thing that we just accept as living in America. And I thought before we were to make any progress on this issue, this epidemic, in terms of solving it, we had to lose that numbness. We had to have our empathy restored. So that was the purpose of the project. That's why I started doing it in the first place. That was the goal.
You can catch my full interview with Steve Hartman on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. In honor of the families in this film and all families who grieve because of these crimes, we say, we wish it were not so. We admire Steve Hartman for his work. We are not numb. Peace. The Daily Report is next.